The Big Five personality trait model is the most well-known model in psychological trait theory. It's the gold standard. I'll start by saying, if you're thinking about taking a personality test, I would highly recommend making sure it's based on the Big Five. The Big Five has been around for over 50 years, and like all good science, the model was arrived at independently by many different researchers. So it's not just one person's theory of personality, it's not a fad, it's not the sleek new personality test your manager made you take at work. The Big Five factor model is based on empirical evidence, it's valid, and it looks like it's here to stay. Okay, so with that advertisement out of the way, what are the 5 personality traits in the Big Five model? They are 1, openness to experience, 2, conscientiousness, 3, extroversion, 4, agreeableness, and 5, neuroticism. If you take a Big Five personality test, your output will give you a percentile ranking within each of these categories. So you could be 10th percentile in openness to experience, far below the median. And you could be 90th percentile in conscientiousness, far above the median, etc., etc. So let's quickly break down each of these 5 dimensions. Openness to experience. This is like how open you are to novel ideas, art, variety. Someone who has high openness to experience would probably be willing to go see a screening of a truly out there, avant-garde art house movie and enjoy it. They would find the strangeness of the movie intriguing, whereas someone low in openness to experience might watch that same avant-garde movie and just conclude it's weird and a total waste of time. As a general rule, brilliant artists that really push boundaries are usually very high in openness to experience. These are the David Lynch, Salvador Dali types. Okay, so the second personality trait is conscientiousness. Highly conscientious people are very industrious. They're very orderly. They enjoy work. They need to work. Conscientiousness actually tends to be inversely correlated with openness to experience. A conscientious person might ask, why would I waste my time watching some weird David Lynch movie when I could be working, when I could be getting things done? CEOs, lawyers, surgeons are invariably high in trait conscientiousness. You just can't work 80 hours a week, work nights, work weekends, and not have an affinity for that kind of labor and that kind of responsibility. If you are working that much and you're low in conscientiousness, then you're probably miserable doing it. Okay, so the third personality trait is extroversion. You're probably already very familiar with this one. Extroversion as in the introvert-extrovert continuum. Extroverts want to be around others. They need a lot of social stimulation. Introverts, on the other hand, are quite happy to spend time alone, and they tend to be more reserved when they're around other people. Now, the fourth trait is agreeableness. Agreeable people will place getting along with others above their own self-interest, and disagreeable people will place their own self-interest above getting along with others. So agreeable people are kind, considerate, cooperative. Disagreeable people are competitive. They can even be argumentative, headstrong. I think this is one of the traits where you really don't want to be at either extreme. If you're too agreeable, you're going to be so averse to confrontation, you're probably just going to get run over by everybody. You're going to be a prime target in the eyes of those more Machiavellian people who might want to take advantage of you, either at work or in relationships. You know, you wouldn't mind staying late tonight to finish this deck for me, would you? Oh no, of course not. We've all seen that dynamic play out. And likewise, you don't want to be too low in agreeableness either, because if you're extremely disagreeable, it will be pretty difficult for you to make friends, because the agreeable people are going to see you as an asshole, and the disagreeable people are going to see you as a rival. So it's kind of a lose-lose socially if you're too disagreeable. Okay, so the last personality trait is an incredibly important one, and that is neuroticism. Neuroticism is your tendency to experience negative emotion, like anger or anxiety or depression. I also like to think of it as how you respond to negative events. So when you miss the bus, do you think, oh my God, I'm late. I can't believe this is terrible. My boss is going to be pissed at me. This is going to ruin my day. That's a reaction a highly neurotic person might have. Or do you think, bummer, I missed the bus. Well, I got to wait for the next one. That's a reaction that a person low in neuroticism may have. And I think it's important to have some sympathy for highly neurotic people, because having a higher propensity for negative emotion is just probably not a very pleasant way to go through life. And you got to remember, and this is a nice segue here, people are hardwired with these traits. Unlike personality states, which are temporary and situational, every now and again, that high conscientiousness person is going to just want a day off to chill. Personality traits are consistent, long-lasting behaviors. They can change a bit over time. You can work to crank your own dials a little bit, but you really don't have that much control over it. Someone who consistently tests at 10th percentile trait neuroticism, they're very low in neuroticism, is just set up to have a much more enjoyable ride than someone that consistently tests at 95th percentile trait neuroticism. There's really nothing that highly neurotic person can do to get themselves down to 10th percentile in trait neuroticism, sort of like a lobotomy. So you got to have some sympathy. The fact that these personality traits are largely attributed to biological or developmental factors, that they're pretty inflexible by the time you get to adulthood, is really, really, really important. Getting really familiar with these traits, I think, can do a lot for you and your relationships. It's going to help you better understand your own nature, and it's going to give you a clearer picture of what an ideal lifestyle might look for you, so you don't try to fit the square peg that is you into the round hole that is a lifestyle that doesn't fit with your personality. And it helps you better understand the nature of people around you, too. It'll help you better understand their motivations and where they're coming from, and maybe even better empathize with people that are wired very differently than you. Bottom line, getting familiar with these traits and understanding that they are pretty inflexible can help you accept your own nature and accept the nature of other people. I think it's truly a travesty that the Big Five is not taught in middle school or high school. It's weird. Everyone tends to be pretty well versed in the extrovert-introvert continuum, but in my experience, almost no one has heard of the other four dimensions in the context of personality modeling. I wish that these other four traits, openness to experience, conscientiousness, agreeability, and neuroticism, were as well assimilated into our vernacular, because they're just as important. I think many people have the wisdom to look at an introvert and say, well, he spends a lot of time alone and only has a few close friends. But you know what? There's nothing wrong with that. He's just very introverted. But if someone decides that they don't want to have a big career, they don't want to work more than 40 hours a week, they're often judged as not being driven, as being lazy. But maybe one day we'll get to a point where we can look at that person without judgment and say, well, you know what? He doesn't want a big career, and maybe he's just a little lower in trait conscientiousness. There's nothing wrong with that. And again, getting familiar with these traits will help you better understand yourself and your own potential. Running with the topic of trait conscientiousness for a second, if you're 10th percentile in trait conscientiousness, if you're very low in trait conscientiousness, you probably want to stop fantasizing about being a CEO one day. You got to stop watching David Goggins and Jocko Willink, as much as I do admire them, and all these motivational videos featuring these people with off-the-charts conscientiousness and beating yourself up for not being able to wake up at 4:30 a.m. every day like them. All the credit in the world to those people, but if you're 10th percentile in trait conscientiousness, getting up at 4:30 a.m. to start your day is just not going to be in your nature. I mean, you're obviously going to have to work. Like, low conscientiousness is not a disability, but you're going to have to find a job that gels with that factor of your personality. And let's say you're 95th percentile in trait openness. You're off the charts in trait openness, and you're frustrated because it feels like everyone around you is so much more close-minded than you. They don't like your weird movies and weird music and unusual ideas on spirituality and the universe. And well, it's because they are. They are literally more closed-minded than you. And you can't hate them for it. They're hardwired that way. Maybe you got to get out there and deliberately try to make some friends that are off the charts in trait openness like you, so you have someone to talk about your Yorgos Lanthimos movies with. But at the end of the day, I think it's actually good to be able to learn to get along with lots of different personality types. The odds of you ever finding someone with your exact same dimensions is infinitesimal. And when you and a friend or partner are really not seeing eye to eye on something, understanding how that conflict may be attributed to differences in your personality traits can help you look at the situation a lot more objectively and calmly. If your spouse hates it when you leave your clothes on the floor, that may just be the orderly part of her high conscientious personality trait talking. And you should be empathetic to that, because the clothes on the floor may legitimately bother her a lot more than they do you. And if you continue to push back and say the clothes are no big deal, well, maybe that's the antagonistic part of your low agreeability talking. And seeing that, maybe your wife can be a little more understanding of your recalcitrance as well. Learning how to embrace people with very different personality traits than you, I think, can make your social life richer as well. Maybe you'll find people whose traits are complementary to yours in some way, and together you can make a great team. You can each bring something out of each other. It's like Scooby-Doo, you got the pot-smoking, high in openness Shaggy and Scooby-Doo. You got the high conscientiousness Brainiac Velma. You got the more extroverted Jock Fred and fashionista Daphne. And altogether, it was a pretty great gang. So in a video last week, Arjun, my co-host on the podcast, discussed the importance of networking this year and shooting to build a professional network of 25 exceptional people. I think it's a great message. And across those 25 people in your budding circle, there are going to be 25 unique personalities. So maybe when you make a new connection this year and in 2021, try to think about how this person might land across each of these 5 dimensions. It might just put you in a better position to effectively nurture that relationship.